They spent $230,000 on my sister's wedding. My son needed $85,000 to live. Guess which one they chose? The words struck like a hammer. We don't have that kind of money lying around, Emily. You need to be realistic about this. My father stood in the doorway of my small apartment, arms crossed tight against his chest, his face carved into stone. My mother hovered behind him, nodding in silent agreement, lips pressed thin as if the conversation itself was distasteful. In the next room, my son Ethan, just 7 years old, was asleep, the hiss of the oxygen machine filling the silence between my parents' judgments. Even in sleep, his breathing was uneven, his fragile body carrying the weight of a heart condition that medicine had failed to cure. The only hope left was an experimental treatment, a chance priced at $85,000. A number that haunted me like a ticking clock, because without it, doctors had given him 6 months, at best. I am Emily, 31 years old, a middle school science teacher in Columbus, Ohio. And for the past 4 years, I've been raising Ethan alone. His father left when the diagnosis came, unable, or unwilling, to face the reality of a sick child. Since then, I have been mother, father, and protector all at once. The kitchen table between us looked less like furniture and more like evidence of failure. Stacks of unpaid medical bills sprawled across its surface, red-letter warnings glaring up at me. Still, I found the courage to ask the one question I had rehearsed over and over. Please. I'm not asking you to empty your accounts. Just a loan. I'll pay it back, every cent. I'll work 2 jobs if I have to. My father shook his head. Emily, you're barely keeping yourself afloat. How could you possibly pay us back? It's not sensible. His tone was firm, final. There are financing plans, medical programs, look into those. But I already had. Every lead, every option, had been a dead end. Payment plans stretched too long. Loan companies demanded interest that would chain me in debt for decades. Most wouldn't even approve me, not with the medical bills I already carried. This was my last hope. I looked at my mother, searching for softness in her eyes. For a moment, I thought she might speak up. Her hand touched my father's arm, as though she wanted to cushion the blow. But the words that came out were only quieter versions of his. Honey, we've already helped so much over the years. We paid for surgeries before. We can't give up our future, not completely. Future. Their future. While my son's was slipping away with every shallow breath. The silence that followed was unbearable. My parents left soon after, retreating to the warmth of their suburban home, the same home where my younger sister, Claire, still lived in her untouched childhood bedroom. From the window, I watched their car disappear down the street. And then the weight of their refusal pressed down like a suffocating blanket. I walked into Ethan's room, sat beside his bed, and listened to the machine that kept him alive for now. His small chest rose and fell, uneven, fragile. He didn't know his grandparents had just sealed his fate. After that night, the silence in my apartment felt heavier than ever. The hum of the refrigerator, the steady sigh of Ethan's oxygen machine, every sound seemed to remind me how quickly time was slipping away. I picked up the phone the next morning and started dialing anyone I could think of. Aunts, cousins, family friends, people I hadn't spoken to in years. I told Ethan's story again and again, hoping someone might be able to help. Most offered sympathy, promises of prayers, or small contributions. My Aunt Teresa mailed $500 and a note filled with love. I was grateful for every penny, but it was like trying to fill an ocean with a teaspoon. 2 weeks later, my worst fear came to life. I came home after a draining day at school to find Ethan's lips tinged blue, his breath shallow and panicked. My heart slammed in my chest as I called an ambulance. Hours blurred together until Dr. Morrison, his cardiologist, pulled me aside. His voice was careful, almost apologetic. Emily, his condition is deteriorating faster than we thought. Without the treatment, he may have 3 months left. Maybe less. 3 months. The words stole the air from my lungs. My baby, my bright little boy with the wide smile and endless curiosity, had only months unless I could find $85,000. That night, I sat at my computer and created a crowdfunding page. I poured my heart into the description, wrote about Ethan's dreams of becoming a scientist, uploaded photos of him grinning before the illness dimmed his light. Friends shared the page. My colleagues donated. Some of my students' parents gave what they could. For 2 weeks, my heart rose with every notification, until it became clear that it wasn't enough. $12,000. That was all. Not even close. And then came the phone call from my sister. Claire's voice was bright, bubbling with excitement. "Emily, you won't believe it. Jeffrey proposed. We're getting married." I forced a smile into my voice. "That's wonderful, Claire. Congratulations." "I know, right? And you'll never guess, Mom and Dad are paying for everything. No limits, no budget. They told us we can have whatever we want. We're thinking Italy or maybe the south of France. Can you imagine? It's going to be perfect." Her words echoed in my ears long after we hung up. No limits. Whatever we want. For her wedding, money flowed like water. For Ethan, there was only scarcity, only refusal. Something inside me shifted that night. A cold, hard seed of realization rooted deep in my chest. And over time, it would grow. The months that followed blurred together in exhaustion, hospital visits, and a deepening sense of despair. I sold everything I owned that had value, my grandmother's ring, my car, even furniture, just to keep up with Ethan's medications. I moved us into a cramped studio apartment, scraping for every dollar while debt piled higher and higher. Meanwhile, Claire's wedding plans became the centerpiece of every family gathering. My parents spoke with glowing pride about tastings at 5-star restaurants and venue tours in Tuscany. I listened quietly, nodding where expected, feeling like a ghost at my own family's table. One July evening, my mother called. I was bone-tired from teaching summer school and hours spent at the hospital. "Emily, we need to talk about the wedding," she said. My stomach tightened. "What about it?" "Claire wants you as a bridesmaid. The dresses are about $300. We need you to order yours soon." $300. I could almost hear the oxygen machine wheezing in the background, reminding me what that money could cover. 2 weeks of Ethan's medicine. "I don't think I can afford that right now," I admitted. The pause on the other end was sharp. "Emily, this is your sister's wedding. You need to make it work." I closed my eyes, holding back tears. "Things are just really tight. You know Ethan's expenses." My mother's voice hardened. "You're always talking about Ethan's expenses. I understand he's sick, but life goes on for the rest of us. This is Claire's special day." The words cut deeper than any knife. Life goes on. For everyone but my son. I sat in the dark that night, the glow of hospital bills around me, and realized how far apart I had drifted from the people who were supposed to love me most. My family saw me not as a daughter or a sister fighting for her child, but as a burden. Ethan's illness was an inconvenience to their joy, and their joy was the only thing that mattered. The divide was no longer invisible. It was a canyon. And every day, it grew wider. By autumn, Ethan's health had worsened beyond what even the doctors had predicted. The treatment window had closed, leaving only palliative care. Each day, I watched my son fade a little more, his spark dimming beneath the weight of pain and exhaustion. He no longer asked when he could go back to school, no longer talked about being a scientist one day. He knew. Children always know when time is running out. I took unpaid leave from work to be with him. Bills piled up faster than I could breathe, but none of it mattered compared to holding his hand, reading his favorite books, and memorizing the rhythm of his breaths. Meanwhile, the wedding consumed my parents' lives. Invitations printed on heavy cardstock. Tastings, fittings, and endless phone calls about floral arrangements. Every conversation seemed to orbit Claire's big day. Then came the call about her bachelorette party. My mother's voice was giddy. "It was magical, Emily. We rented a villa in Napa. 12 of Claire's closest friends. Wine tastings, spa treatments, a private chef. It was absolutely perfect." I forced myself to ask, "How much did it cost?" "Oh, I don't know exactly. Your father handled it. Maybe 10,000. but worth every penny to see Claire so happy. 10,000. More than a tenth of what could have saved Ethan. Spent on a single weekend of indulgence. Something inside me cracked that day. The fragile thread of loyalty I'd been clinging to snapped under the weight of their indifference. Not long after, Ethan's decline accelerated. October brought cold air and with it, the certainty of the end. The doctors no longer spoke of months. They whispered of weeks, days. And when I begged my parents to spend more time with him, they always had appointments. A venue walkthrough. A florist meeting. Rehearsal dinners that could not be moved. 3 days before Claire's wedding, Ethan died in his sleep. My son. My heart. My world. Gone. I called my parents through my tears. My mother's first words weren't of grief. They were of timing. Oh, Emily, what terrible timing. Terrible timing. As though my child's death was merely an inconvenient scheduling conflict. In that moment, something inside me froze solid. The grief was unbearable, but beneath it, a cold and patient clarity began to take root. They had made their choice. Now, someday, I would make mine. The funeral was set for Friday, 2 days before Claire's wedding. I hadn't asked them to move the ceremony, hadn't asked my sister to postpone her celebration. I knew the answer I would receive. Still, I wasn't prepared when my mother called with a request of her own. Emily, honey, could you possibly change the funeral to Thursday? Friday is very difficult for us. The rehearsal, the dinner, everything is scheduled. Guests are flying in. It would be so much more convenient for everyone. Convenient. As though burying my son a day earlier would make their cocktail hour easier. I ended the call without answering, my grief beyond words. The funeral remained on Friday. It was a small service, quiet, intimate, paid for with money I borrowed from my school principal, who showed me more compassion than my own family. 20 people came, my Aunt Teresa, some of my colleagues, a few parents of Ethan's classmates. My parents arrived 45 minutes late, dressed as if they were already preparing for the wedding festivities. They stayed for the service but left immediately after, skipping the small reception I had organized. It was a lovely service, Emily. Very tasteful, my mother said before walking out. Tasteful. As if my child's funeral was an event to be critiqued, another box checked before they could return to centerpieces and seating charts. Saturday, I spent alone. My phone buzzed with sympathy messages I couldn't answer. I sat in silence, surrounded by Ethan's belongings, the air still heavy with his absence. And then Sunday came, Claire's wedding day. I hadn't wanted to acknowledge it, but the photos arrived anyway. My mother had added me to a family group chat, as though I were just another guest who couldn't attend. I scrolled through pictures of golden Tuscan vineyards, Claire in her designer gown, a string quartet playing beneath the sunset. $230,000. That was the cost of their joy. 3 times the amount that could have saved Ethan. The number repeated in my mind like a scream. I stared at my phone, my vision blurring. While my son's grave sat bare, without even a proper headstone I could afford, my family danced beneath chandeliers and drank champagne that cost more than the donations I had begged for. That night, I made myself a promise. This wasn't over. The wedding ended, but the photographs kept arriving. Smiling faces, crystal glasses clinking, captions about the best day ever. Each image was another knife twist. My phone buzzed with texts from my mother, light and thoughtless. Home from Italy. Exhausted, but so happy. Claire and Jeffrey's first dance was magical. I'll send you the video. Glad you had a good time, I typed back, my fingers numb. That night, I pulled out a notebook and began writing. Every conversation, every refusal, every expense. Dates, numbers, details. I documented how much I had begged, what I had offered, how they had turned me away. I wrote down the figures for the wedding, the $80,000 for the venue, the $15,000 for flowers, the $12,000 for the dress. I even noted the phrases that had carved scars into my memory. Be realistic. Life goes on. Terrible timing. I wasn't sure what I would do with this record, but I knew one thing, I would not let Ethan's life be erased. Not by silence. not by their indifference. The weeks after his funeral passed in a grey haze. I returned to work, drifting through days like a ghost. My students were gentle with me, kinder than my own family. My parents called sometimes, their voices stiff, checking in only to speak of Claire's honeymoon or their remodeling plans. They never spoke of Ethan. Not once. It was as though he had never existed. Claire sent a single text. I'm sorry about everything. I hope we can move past this. Move past this. Move past burying my son alone while she walked down an aisle in a dress worth more than his treatment. Move past the silence, the selfishness, the betrayal. I never replied. December came, and with it, an invitation to Christmas dinner. Against my better judgment, I went. Their house was immaculate, glittering with decorations that belonged in a magazine. Claire and Jeffrey were there, glowing from their honeymoon in Bali. Dinner was lavish, every plate piled high with prime rib and lobster tails. The wine, my father proudly announced, cost $200 a bottle. I sat in silence, pushing food around my plate while they laughed, while they spoke of vacations, golf clubs, and plans for the future. When they finally turned to me, it was with polite concern. "Emily, you're so quiet," Claire said, her tone sugar-sweet. "Are you okay?" "I'm fine," I lied. "You know," she continued, "maybe you should think about moving. A fresh start somewhere else could help you heal. Columbus must be so heavy with memories." I stared at her. Heal? As if leaving behind Ethan's city, his grave, his memory, would erase the truth. As if I was the one who needed to change, while they carried on untouched. My father cleared his throat. "Emily, your mother and I have been talking. We think you need to consider bankruptcy. With your debts, it's the responsible choice." Bankruptcy. As if my son's life had been a financial misstep, a mistake to be corrected. I set my fork down carefully. You know what would have helped? $85,000. 15 months ago. Silence dropped over the table like a curtain. My mother's smile froze. Claire shifted uncomfortably. My father's jaw tightened. "We've been over this," he said firmly. "Have we?" I asked. Because what I remember is you saying no, and then planning a wedding 3 times as expensive as what could have saved Ethan's life. "Emily," my mother began, but I was already standing, my chair scraping against the floor. "You made your choice," I said. "And so will I." I left them there, among their candles and their wine, their perfect little family tableau. That was the last Christmas I spent with them. It was the last time I allowed myself to sit at their table and pretend they were my family. From then on, I lived with a clarity sharper than grief. They had abandoned Ethan. They had abandoned me. And one day, I would return the lesson. After that Christmas night, silence stretched between us like a canyon. Months turned into years without a word. I buried myself in work, in survival, in building a life that no longer depended on anyone else. The debt crushed me at first. I followed my father's advice and filed for bankruptcy, though it felt like admitting defeat. My credit was ruined, but the weight of those medical bills finally lifted from my shoulders. I moved into a cheaper apartment in a rougher neighborhood, cut every unnecessary expense, and took on tutoring jobs in the evenings. My life became small, pared down to the essentials. But even in the rubble of grief, I found a strange kind of determination. Ethan was gone, and I couldn't save him, but I could save myself. Slowly, brick by brick, I began to rebuild. I went back to school, taking online classes late at night after grading papers. The exhaustion was brutal, but I pressed forward. 3 years later, I had a master's degree in education administration. I was promoted to assistant principal, then principal. The pay wasn't extravagant, but it was steady, respectable, enough to finally breathe again. I never forgot, though. Every Christmas card from Claire, every distant attempt by my parents to reach me, I saved. A baby announcement declaring my niece Sophia as the first grandchild. Photos of family vacations, golf outings, and holidays where my son's name was never spoken. Evidence. Proof that Ethan had been erased from their story, replaced as though he had never existed. I made real friends during those years. People who stood by me, who cared without condition. I traveled when I could, carrying Ethan's ashes to places he would have loved, the mountains, the ocean, quiet forests where the wind seemed to whisper his name. I lived for both of us. And all the while, I waited. Not with bitterness, not even with anger anymore. Just patience. Because life has a way of circling back. Choices have consequences, and one day, theirs would come due. It took 4 years. One spring morning, I opened an email from Aunt Teresa. Her words were careful, but the news was explosive. My father's company had collapsed in a fraud scandal. The CEO faced charges, and the company went bankrupt. My parents had invested everything, their entire retirement, in that stock. It was gone. So was his job. Foreclosure loomed over their house. For the first time in years, I smiled without forcing it. The balance of power had shifted. The first phone call came a week after Aunt Teresa's email. My mother's number flashed on the screen. I let it ring until voicemail picked it up. She called again the next day, and the day after. Then my father tried. I ignored them all. Finally, one evening in May, a knock sounded at my door. When I checked the peephole, I almost didn't recognize him. My father, once so sharp and commanding, looked thinner, older, his shoulders slumped beneath a suit that no longer fit. "Emily," he said when I opened the door, though I kept the chain in place. His voice cracked on my name. "Please, we need to talk." "About what?" My voice was flat, cold. "Can I come in?" "No." He flinched, but pressed on. "I lost my job. You've probably heard. We're in serious trouble. The house is in foreclosure. Your mother's health isn't good, and we can't afford treatment. We need help. Even a loan. Anything." The words hung in the air like smoke. For a moment, I almost couldn't breathe. How many times had I begged them with those same words? How many times had I heard the refusal in their voices, the judgment in their eyes? "Help." I repeated, tasting the word like ash. "Yes," he said quickly. "Just enough to get by. 90,000 to save the house, but even 20 or 30,000 would give us time." 90,000. Almost the exact sum I had once begged for Ethan. I let the silence stretch, then said softly, "I'll think about it." And I closed the door in his face. For 2 weeks, I said nothing. They called 17 more times. Claire sent long messages about family, forgiveness, and how I needed to remember they had always done their best. The irony was unbearable. Instead of answering, I checked the foreclosure listings. Their house, my childhood home, was set for auction in 45 days. They were desperate, just as I had once been. And just like I had once been, they were running out of time. On the 15th day, I called my father back. His relief was so raw I could hear it through the line. "Thank God, Emily. I was afraid you'd never answer." "We need to meet," I said. "You, Mom, and Claire. At my apartment. Saturday. 2 p.m. "We'll be there," he promised. And so, for the first time in years, my family would sit together again. Not around their table of plenty, not in the comfort of their home, but on my terms, in the space where I had endured the silence of their abandonment. It would not be a reunion. It would be a reckoning. Saturday came grey and cold, fitting weather for what was about to happen. I spent the morning preparing my apartment, arranging 3 chairs on one side of the room, a folder of documents neatly stacked on the table. Every page, every note I had written over the years, was ready. Evidence. Proof. At exactly 2 o'clock, they arrived. My father, smaller than I remembered, his suit hanging loose. My mother, lined with worry, eyes red as if tears had become her constant companion. Claire stood beside them in a designer coat, stiff-backed and defensive. "Emily," my mother whispered, stepping forward as if to hug me. "Sit," I said. My voice left no room for argument. They sat together on my worn couch, 3 figures that looked more like defendants than family. I remained standing. "You asked me for $90,000, I began. My father leaned forward. "We know it's a lot, but we're prepared to sign papers. Collateral, interest, whatever you need." I opened the folder, pulling out the first page. 4 years ago, I asked you for $85,000. Do you remember what you told me? Emily. You told me to be realistic. You told me you couldn't afford it. That you had to think about your future. I held up a printed receipt. And yet, months later, you paid $230,000 for Claire's wedding. Venue, flowers, food, the dress. Shall I go through the list? Claire flushed red. This isn't fair. You're twisting. Sit down, I snapped. My voice was harder than I had ever heard it. She obeyed. My father's voice cracked. We made mistakes. But Ethan. Don't you dare say his name, I cut in. My hands shook, but my words were steel. I laid down a photograph on the table. Ethan, frail in his hospital bed, taken 2 weeks before he died. This is what $85,000 would have saved. This child. My son. Your grandson. My mother's sobs filled the silence. My father's face crumpled, but I saw no regret there, only shame at being forced to face it. Claire turned away, eyes shining but dry. You chose flowers and a string quartet over him, I continued, my voice low. You chose wine and dresses and centerpieces. Don't pretend it was anything else. What do you want from us? My father asked at last, his voice breaking. An apology. Fine. We're sorry. We made a mistake. Mistake? I repeated. No. You made a choice. And Ethan died because of it. Silence fell again, heavier than before. Then I placed a check on the table. $90,000. Dated today. Their eyes lit up, hope flooding their faces. Conditions, I said. First, you admit, right now, that you chose Claire's wedding over Ethan's life. Say it out loud. They hesitated. I didn't move. At last, my father spoke, his voice hollow. We chose the wedding. We had the money, and we spent it on Claire instead of Ethan. And he died because of it. My mother whispered through tears. We should have saved him. We failed you. I turned to Claire. And you? Her chin lifted, defiant. I didn't know. You knew enough. You knew I begged. You knew Ethan was dying while you planned spa weekends and wine tastings. You never even questioned where the money came from. Her silence was answer enough. The second condition, I continued. You take this money, save your house, and you never contact me again. No calls. No cards. No holidays. From this moment on, I am no longer your daughter, your sister. I am nothing to you, just as Ethan became nothing to all of you. Emily, please, my mother choked. Those are my terms. Take them or leave them. The three of them exchanged desperate looks, their pride crumbling beneath the weight of foreclosure. After a long, painful pause, my father picked up the pen and signed the agreement I had prepared. My mother followed, then Claire, her strokes sharp and angry. I handed them the check. Now get out. They filed out quietly, like mourners leaving a graveside. When the door shut behind them, I locked it and let out a breath I had been holding for 4 years. It wasn't revenge. It was justice. And it was only the beginning. The check cleared, but I wasn't finished. That night, I opened my laptop and sent an email to Aunt Teresa, the only family member who had ever truly stood by me. Attached was a document I had been compiling for years, every refusal, every medical bill, every receipt from Claire's wedding, every cruel phrase etched into my memory. There was even a photo of Ethan in his hospital bed, frail but still smiling, alongside a screenshot where my mother had called Sophia her first grandchild. I wrote simply, Aunt Teresa, I think the family deserves to know the truth. Please share this with whoever you believe should see it. Love, Emily. By morning, it was everywhere. Through emails, phone calls, social media, the truth spread faster than wildfire. Friends, church members, country club companions, all of them knew. My parents' carefully cultivated reputation as generous, devoted grandparents shattered in a single day. I didn't feel joy, exactly. Just a deep, steady calm. They had taught me that choices have consequences. Now they were finally living with theirs. Weeks passed, and word filtered back to me through whispers. Their friends stopped calling. They left the country club. My mother no longer attended church. My father found a consulting job that paid a fraction of his old salary. They kept their house with the money I had given them, but it had become a prison. The walls that once held family dinners and celebrations now echoed with shame. Claire tried once more, appearing at my door, furious. "You're destroying them," she hissed. "You've ruined their lives." I looked at her without anger, without pity. "I didn't ruin their lives, Claire. They did. I only told the truth." She accused me of being cruel, heartless. I shook my head. "No. Heartless was planning a wedding while your nephew lay dying. Heartless was asking me to move my son's funeral for your rehearsal dinner. Heartless was pretending he never existed. Don't confuse consequences with cruelty." She left, and I closed the door behind her for the last time. Years later, I rarely thought of them at all. I had built a life of my own, one of quiet strength and purpose. I traveled, made friends who were more like family, even opened my heart again to the possibility of love. Wherever I went, I carried Ethan with me. I scattered his ashes in places of beauty, whispered his name to the wind, and lived in a way that honored him. Sometimes people ask me if I regret what I did. If cutting my family out completely was too harsh. I only smile. They never watched their child die while their family spent a fortune on wine and flowers. They never had to bury their baby with borrowed money while their parents toasted champagne in Tuscany. Forgiveness, real forgiveness, requires repentance. They never offered it. And so I gave them the only thing left, the same lesson they once gave me. That family is conditional. That love has limits. That choices define us more than blood ever could. It wasn't revenge. It was balance. It was justice. And with Ethan's memory carried in my heart, I finally found peace.